Kingdom Hearts 3 was developed by Square Enix and published by Square Enix. I believe the development team that worked on this is the same development team that worked on Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. And this game marks the conclusion to a long story that began in 2002 with the very first Kingdom Hearts game, and has spanned multiple spin-offs, appearing on several different platforms. And so there's been a lot of anticipation for this game. This game originally was announced at E3 2013, along with Final Fantasy 15. And at the time, this game was in its infancy. Square Enix had done their usual shtick, and they announced the game too early. So fast forward 6 years, I can't believe I'm saying that, and the final game just recently came out. I just recently finished the game yesterday as I'm recording this. So first and foremost, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a great game. Kingdom Hearts 3, I think, is a fantastic game, but it does have some flaws to it, which is why I don't believe it's the best Kingdom Hearts game in the series. And I'll probably make a separate video discussing that in particular. So this game is really split into two different parts. There's the prologue to the game, which is Kingdom Hearts 2.9, and then there's Kingdom Hearts 3, which is pretty much the rest of the game. Now, both parts use the same gameplay mechanics throughout the entire game, and so there's really not much of a difference. The prologue is just something stupid and random that Square Enix put into the beginning of the game. It really could have been skipped over. But from a gameplay perspective, Kingdom Hearts 3 is arguably the best game in the series. It combines pretty much every single gameplay element from the older Kingdom Hearts games that were good, and it just meshes them together in one big title. So the shot lock commands from Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, those make a return in this game. The wall running and interacting with certain objects in the environment, those mechanics were ripped from Dream Drop Distance. And there's a lot of callbacks to the first two Kingdom Hearts games, Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. A lot of the same enemies make a return in this game. A lot of the same characters make a return in this game, including the Organization 13 members, which originally I wasn't cool with them bringing back those characters, but I ended up being okay with it for the final product. Everything that Kingdom Hearts 3 does well, it pretty much took from one of the older Kingdom Hearts games, which from a certain perspective can be viewed as an issue because the game isn't actually doing anything new gameplay-wise, since it's taking mechanics from the older Kingdom Hearts games and just utilizing them for Kingdom Hearts 3. But the game combines those gameplay elements together so well that it's really not a problem. It actually works to the game's benefit. The gameplay, once again, is the best part about Kingdom Hearts 3, as it was with the older Kingdom Hearts games. The combat feels fast, it's fluid, and for the most part it's responsive, albeit a bit floaty. And there's a lot of different layers to it, from the shot lock commands, to the environmental interactions, to the character links, to the different magic spells that are in the game, and the cooperative attacks as well with your party members. The combat system is very robust, and it has personality to it. It's a lot of fun, and it's easily the best part about the game. The weak side of the gameplay really comes from the gummy ship missions, which once again are the weakest element of Kingdom Hearts. They did try and improve it and make it something that was not necessarily an on-rails thing like they did with the previous Kingdom Hearts games, but still the gummy ship mission stuff is just not something that I really wanted to deal with when I was playing this game. It's actually something I wanted to skip. And in certain parts of the game, before you land on the world, the game will force you into a boss fight for one of these gummy ship missions, and that's something I didn't appreciate. There was this one boss in particular, a flying fortress, that was just a pure damage sponge, and I didn't want to deal with it. Fortunately, that particular boss fight, the game didn't force me to play. The gummy ship aspect of the game is pretty much just another way to extend the life of the game, although it's not a very good way to do that, and I found myself just skimming through a lot of it. And of course, there's a bunch of different side activities that you can do in this game, some of which are fun, some of which aren't as fun. The mini games have never been a highlight of the Kingdom Hearts series. There's only 5 new worlds in this game, which is a problem. 2 of the worlds in particular are very mediocre. Much more could have been done with them from a creative standpoint, and those worlds are Toy Story and Frozen. Toy Story is probably the weakest world in the game because they placed that world in a shopping mall, and out of all the different locations that they could have chosen for Toy Story, a shopping mall is definitely not something that I personally would have chosen. I personally would have placed that world within Sid's room, like you could go between Andy's room and Sid's room, or they could have had the location from Toy Story 2 where Woody was taken in that particular film, but they didn't do that. The shopping mall is a very boring location. It's not very interesting, and there's not much that they really do with it. And Frozen is just a reenactment of the Frozen film, right down to the Let It Go song that Square Enix should have been smart enough not to put that in the game, but they did. And the only thing you do in that world is follow Elsa around. And I was actually expecting Elsa to be a part of your team. I was expecting her to become one of the guest party members in the game, but that never happens. Instead, a character called Marshmallow, the big giant scary snowman from Frozen, becomes a guest party member right at the very end of that world. And so I wasn't really cool with that. Outside of Toy Story and Frozen, Big Hero 6 was done extremely well. There's a lot of environmental interaction in that particular level. Tangled was done very well, primarily because of the level design. There's a lot of different layers to the level design for that particular world. But the best world in the game is the Caribbean, which is based off of Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's actually the world I was looking forward to the least, primarily because it follows Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which is the movie that made me dislike Pirates of the Caribbean. But as it turns out, mainly due to the naval-based combat, which is a more casualized version of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, as well as the underwater-based gameplay, easily makes that particular world the best one that they added to Kingdom Hearts 3. And it's the world that I enjoyed the most. Outside of that, you do have some other worlds in the game, but they're solely meant for the story later in the game, and they're not actual worlds that you can explore within. They're just meant to provide a backdrop to some of the later events that happen in the game, and they're heavily scripted, so those worlds don't count. You really only have 8 worlds in this game, and only 5 of them are new. You do have 3 returning worlds. One is Winnie the Pooh, which I've never cared about that world. The next one is Mount Olympus, which I thought they did a great job with bringing that world back, and I believe that's the only world that's been in every single Kingdom Hearts game leading up to Kingdom Hearts 3. And the third world that makes a return is the Caribbean, which I just spoke about. So for the most part, the worlds are done pretty well in this game. However, after waiting 13 years for this game to come out, it's disappointing, to say the least, that there weren't more worlds, more Disney worlds included in this game. You know, no Incredibles, no Brave, no Atlantis the Lost Empire, no Treasure Planet, so on and so forth, the list goes on. However, the worlds that they did add to the game were handled pretty well. Graphically, this game is beautiful. They didn't go for a typical cel-shaded look, which is what they could have done, and it's a very different art style from the older Kingdom Hearts games. This looks more like a Pixar movie, more so than any other video game that I've ever seen. The character models in particular are just gorgeous, and the environments look pretty good too, except for certain objects in the environment. If you pull up the camera real close, some of those textures still look like they belong on the PS2. But of course, in order to notice something like that, you would have to pay real close attention to look for any kind of graphical inconsistencies. You know, this is a AAA game through and through. Square Enix did put money behind this. The animations and the different effects, the magical effects and the environmental effects are very lifelike and believable, and they play well to the game's art style. So gameplay wise, the game is good. Graphically, the game is good, and the content that is offered in the game is good as well. The weakest part about Kingdom Hearts 3 is, surprise, surprise, its story. The story in this game starts off simple, but it becomes convoluted and too caught up in its own stupidity that I started to lose interest in the overall arching story, not even halfway through the game. You had multiple different characters in separate locations trying to do completely different things. You had young Xehanort over here trying to do something, and you had Riku and Mickey over here trying to do something else, and Sora, Donald, and Goofy were trying to accomplish their own goal, and Kairi and Axel were in another location, doing something completely different from everyone else. It was just a mess. The story was all over the place in this game, and the conclusion of this story wasn't good by any means. It certainly wasn't worth waiting 13 years for, especially considering this game pulls an X-Men The Last Stand, where the only interest the game seems to take is asking more questions rather than answering them. And it does a lot of build-up for there to be a potential fourth game in the series, which is probably inevitable at this point. And that pisses me off even more, considering that Square Enix forced people to download the ending to this game due to the fact that the ending leaked before the game released. Although the same thing happened with Final Fantasy 15, and they didn't do that bullshit then. So why they did it now is beyond me. So the story was extremely weak, and a lot of it doesn't make any sense because it's stupid, because that's what the story of Kingdom Hearts has become. It's become completely inane, and it's hard to take anything seriously when the game itself takes its own stupid shit too seriously. I think the worst part of the game's story isn't even the big revelation that's revealed at the end of the game with a particular Organization 13 character, but rather what they did with Sora, in that they tried to pull a Frodo from The Lord of the Rings Return of the King. And that doesn't really work in the context of the game's story, considering the reason why he leaves is for Kairi. Due to what happened to Kairi at the end of this game, it doesn't really make any sense that Sora would make that decision. But I could point out all kinds of different flaws in this game's story. I made a video about Kingdom Hearts 3's story before the game came out, saying for anyone with a brain, of course, who knows the difference between good storytelling and bad storytelling, for anyone who was looking forward to this game just for the story, mainly for the story, there's no way you can't be disappointed unless you're that much of a fanboy. Unless you did what I did and you go into this game not really giving a shit about the story, knowing that it's going to be stupid, knowing that it's going to be convoluted, knowing that it's not going to make any sense, and that it's ultimately just going to be a waste of time. The main attraction for me to this game was the gameplay and the character interactions with the Disney characters, which is handled just as well as any of the previous Kingdom Hearts games that came before this. Now, there are some other weaknesses, some glaring flaws due to omissions that were made by the development team that worked on this, and I'm going to discuss those things in another video, a separate video. I'm not going to talk about those things in this particular retrospective. The only thing I'll say on that is this is not the best Kingdom Hearts game. It comes close, but it's not the best one. Overall, when you look at everything that this game has, every component from its gameplay to its story, it's just not the best game in the series, objectively. But this is a great Kingdom Hearts game. This is a game that was made for Kingdom Hearts fans. And it's the first great RPG game that Square Enix has released since the PS4 and the Xbox One came out, because Final Fantasy 15 ended up being a weak game, and so did Nier Automata. This game is much better than both of them by comparison. When it comes to the professional review publications that did reviews for this game got a lot of great reviews, mainly a bunch of 8 out of 10s, some 9s in there. Realistically, obviously, the game's not that good. This is definitely an 8 out of 10. I would say it's a low tier 8 out of 10. And of course, all the major review publications were saying the same thing. The gameplay is great, but the story is weak. But if you ignore the story, then you can really take notice of what the game does well, which is the gameplay, and gameplay is what's most important in a video game at the end of the day. So that concludes my retrospective for Kingdom Hearts 3. Was it worth the wait, waiting 13 years to play this? Obviously not, but the game still turned out to be a damn good experience. And this is going to be my last Kingdom Hearts game, more than likely, unless they bring Sora back, maybe. That's probably the only way I would care about having any part in playing a future sequel to this, but even then would be questionable even if they did bring him back. So for the most part, I got what I wanted out of this game, and I feel like I can move on from the series at this point.